Welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Tonight's guests are two writers who are at the beginning of what promises to be prolific writing careers. A.E. Clarke will join us later in the programme to talk about his debut novel. Grayscale, about a modern-day superhero, features a cast of diverse characters. We'll explore what makes them and this story entertaining. First, though, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Windsor's Youth Poet Laureate, Alexei Andrei, also known as Alexei Ungurenasu. Alexei has said, "Over time, I think that poetry started to change the way I see and experience the world. It changes the way we frame things. It makes us see new connections. I think it tickles a part of the brain that gets us excited." Crafting poems, paintings, and zines are some of the ways Alexei expresses creativity. Originally from Romania, Alexei brings this perspective of living in two different societies to the creative process. And Alexei's studies in English and philosophy at the University of Windsor have introduced more serious literature and provided ideas and connections. Here to talk about all of this art and creativity is Alexei Ungurenasu. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters. It's lovely to have you here.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Now, take me back. Tell me a little bit about your background in leaving Romania and coming to Canada.
I was born in Iași, which is on the northeastern border of Romania. And when I was 12, I moved to Toronto with my mom and my stepdad. And I went to high school there. And after I graduated, I took a gap year, decided to move to Windsor, and got enrolled at the university.
Why Windsor?
Honestly, because it was cheap and I could see myself living independently here and studying.
So you come to the university, and how long have you been writing poetry? Did you start writing when you were little?
No, actually. The way poetry started in Romania made me not like it. But in grade 10, one of my English teachers had an assignment where we were supposed to find any poem we wanted and recite it in front of the class. So I found A Psalm of Life by Henry Longfellow, and I just fell in love with it. And I thought, you know what? I want to see if I can write things too.
Wow. Were there other poets who inspired you?
Yeah, over time, I guess Leonard Cohen was an early inspiration. And as soon as I started university, I was introduced to writers like E.E. Cummings and William Blake, and they had a big impact.
Now, you are Windsor's Youth Poet Laureate. How did that happen?
Yeah, it was interesting. I've been doing events in the city, both with writing and poetry, but also just in general with the arts. And I've volunteered with galleries like Artside. So, volunteering and being in an artistic community was already part of my life. So I thought if I applied for the role, I would be able to, do it at a bigger scale. And I was surprised that I got it. And it's been a journey in the past year.
What do you think tipped the balance and they chose you?
Maybe my past experience with volunteering and doing events, probably my writing too, although I didn't take creative writing at university. I just always wrote things and sent them to my friends.
So what have you been doing in your role as laureate?
Yeah, it's been an interesting start because most of the things I've done have been online. I started a series of monthly interviews with other young and emerging writers where we interview each other and share different kinds of writing, not just poetry, but also scripts and short story fragments. I've done that with the Vanguard Youth Arts Collective, which I'm part of. I've been doing a series of written interviews with artists in general. I've been doing quite a few readings. I've started a small writing group with a few other students at the university. We're working on getting a high school zine in the next few months. And in general, I hope that as things are opening up, I can go into the actual high schools and do workshops or just introduce, high school students to literature.
How much more difficult has it been? I mean, you became laureate during COVID.
Yeah. Well, I've done pretty much all of my readings from my bedroom. This is maybe the first time I'm not in my bedroom for a video. But it's been sort of slow. I've been trying to be as active as I can online, and all of the things I've been doing, like the workshops and writing groups, have been on Zoom. Now that we're finally back on campus, for example, I'm starting to feel more energy, not just for myself, but from everyone else around me.
I have to ask you, I've got a bunch of stuff I want to talk about, but what does your mom think about you being appointed laureate?
Oh, she loves it. She's in Romania right now, and she's telling everyone and trying to explain what the youth poet laureate is. But she's always been supportive of my writing ever since high school. So I'm just, happy to make her proud.
So when you've been doing all of this, this communicating online, has there been something or someone who has stood out for you, who has sort of, you feel, when you're discussing things with other writers, you always sort of look to see if there's something special in that person. Have you met that person?
Yeah, I most of my guests from First Impressions, the show I'm doing where we're interviewing each other, I become friends with them, and I keep in touch. We share writing opportunities with one another. If I can give a shout out, I'll give one to Serafina Piacentin, who is, I think, in her second year of English and creative writing, and she's just phenomenal at what she's doing, and I'm so excited to see what else she'll continue doing in our community.
Now, did you have to present the city with a list of things that you wanted to accomplish, some goals during your tenure?
Yeah, I wanted to help other young people have almost the same introduction, if not a better introduction, to literature and poetry as something that they can do and something that is just naturally around them, especially in the city. So part of it was just, to break the ice in some ways with young, potential artists and writers, and just in general to also represent the city. And like I said earlier, to just be able to do the things I was doing, but with the city's support, and to reach towards more people.
What goals have you been able to accomplish?
I've definitely been able to even just encourage, people, but mostly in the university, in the English program, to, put in applications for projects, to put in, to do things. If they were artists, for example, I've had a few friends who I've convinced to, start writing some poems, and they're amazing. You can see how their background in visual art translates into writing. So those are some things I hope I achieved, but my focus for the second part of my term is to definitely do more in-person events and reach out, especially to the high school scene.
Now, we both mentioned the word zines. Many people probably haven't got a clue what a zine is. Can you explain it?
Sure. Yeah, I have a couple here. A zine is basically short for magazine. And this is kind of what they look like. They're short little booklets, and I've been making them for the past couple of years. They just have poems and other visual designs. And I make them digitally. And I would send them to my friends on email or social media, and I was hoping to actually start printing them, and there's one local poet who printed zines and hid them inside books at Lady Library, and I found at least 2 of them, so I was hoping to do that, and give people poetic surprises, but I was doing zines without realizing when I was even 4 or 5 years old, and I would just get pieces of paper, write stories, and do drawings and fold them together like little books. So it kind of came full circle.
It's a really interesting part of the craft, isn't it?
It is. It is.
You mentioned also that you did some work with the Arts Council. What were you involved with there?
A couple of things. I initiated their New Voices program, which is this billboard on the side of the building on Wyandotte Street East. It has, I think, about 8 lines and a limited number of characters. And we're inviting both local and provincial artists, not just writers, to submit proposals for ways to use that space. So I started it with a poem, but there's been other works that, were more challenging in some ways, asked important questions, and more artistic in general. That was one thing. And the other one was actually this zine I did for the diasporic expressions. It was a program with other artists, and I decided to do a zine with pictures from my hometown and a poem reflecting on how I miss it.
That's terrific. Now, speaking of poem, why don't you read something from one of your poems for us? I have 2 here, because before we run out of time, we really must hear a piece of your poetry.
Of course, I'd be happy to. These have been inspired by the return to campus. So this one is called Dillon Hall 253. There's a story in the department about how she took it upon herself to repaint the graduate student's office on a weekend afternoon. In the 2 years we were away, someone repainted the walls in my favorite lecture room, the one with continuous tables across which I once slid a poetry zine to you, where she lowered the blinds to recreate Plato's cave, and where we witnessed her final lecture, or that time we played cicada noises during her lecture on the Phaedrus, curious for her reaction. The walls were dark back then, a dim room where ideas lived preserved in the walls. Now they're sterile white. We bounce pragmatist ideas around, but I can still hear the cicadas, see shadows creep along the walls. I can still hear the satisfaction in her voice when she closed the book for the last time. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republic.
Thank you so much. And we wish you all the best with the months that you have remaining on your role as Youth Poet Laureate.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
It has.
Now, you can see more of Alexi's work on Instagram and on Twitter. You who love science fiction and superheroes, you'll want to stick around for our next interview. Grayscale is A.E. Clarke's debut novel. He wrote the book over 10 years on and off, developing the characters and making revisions, sometimes as a result of Clarke's own involvement in social activism. When Clarke finally completed his manuscript a year ago, he initially didn't receive much interest from Canadian publishers. But he persevered and cast the net further, sending his manuscript to smaller publishers and specifically LGBTQ publishers. Beaten Track Publishing from the UK loved it. And here now to talk about Grayscale is author A.E. Clarke himself. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you again.
So now tell me, where did the idea for the book come from? This is your debut novel, and clearly you invested a lot of time and passion into it, a labor of love.
Oh, definitely. I've always loved superheroes. I grew up with X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and I knew that I always knew that I wanted to write a book about superheroes. And the inspiration for this one actually came when I was daydreaming on a bus in Toronto one day. I think it was just going to work, and just thought about a scene that actually ended up in the book.
Daydreaming is, I think, such an important aspect of life, especially for creative people, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, for sure. Most of my ideas are either daydreaming or just regular dreaming.
So I want to talk about the story, but tell us about that process.
National Novel Writing Month is, it's every year in November, people try to write 50,000 words just in the month of November. This was the first time that I won.
Wow. Of course, like so many writers, you send out lots of queries and you get lots of rejections.
Yes.
Tell me about getting that UK publisher.
I sent out probably about 200 submissions and got probably about 3 or 4 rejection letters, and the rest just I never heard from again.
This is so important for writers to hear because, writers starting out, if they get a few rejections, it really throws them. But rejections are part of the process.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I remember reading On Writing by Stephen King and him talking about his first rejection letter that he ended up actually putting on his wall. And that was something that really stuck with me. And I almost did that with my first rejection letter, except for it was an email and it was kind of brief and it didn't really work.
Okay, let's talk about that story. So you have 2 main characters, Jesse and his sister Holly, and then there are significant others. Mm-hmm. And so you said, was it Holly who came first? Jesse.
Well, Holly was originally Gary.
Right.
And I kind of conceived of Gary and Jesse together. They're both kind of half of me, in a way, at least.
And so who did you develop?
I developed Jesse first. Holly is very much the main character, and I think she ended up getting a lot more development over the years, but Jesse was the one who came more naturally to me.
So now it was important for you to have that LGBTQ theme, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely. I knew right from the beginning that there was going to be queer themes in my works. Yeah. I know that I'm going to probably have some sort of queer elements in everything that I write. It's very important to me because I am gay, and that representation I know was really, really important to me as a kid in whatever small ways that I could find it. And I actually know that a couple people have actually bought this book for their queer sons or grandsons or nieces and nephews. So I'm hoping, it makes me happy knowing that I am that representation now.
I have to say, while I was reading it, I didn't know you were gay. Mm-hmm. And as I was reading it, I thought a gay person had to have written this because, there was, a warmth of feeling, not between the couples. I don't mean that sort of thing, but there was something in the way that the character was developed and the way they interacted. And I thought somebody who really knows what it is to be a gay person had to have written this.
I'm really glad that came through.
Yeah. So how do you think your book compares to other books where there is an LGBTQ theme, avoiding stereotypes? I didn't sort of get that you were putting a stereotype in this book.
That was my big goal. I wanted Jesse's sexual orientation to be a major part of who he was, because it is a major part of who a lot of us are.
Yeah.
But I didn't want it to be the only thing about him. And I knew that I wanted his coming out to his sister to be a major plot point, but I didn't want it to be his entire character arc. And I think that's something that somewhere where a lot of media fails in portraying queer characters, especially queer teens, is they make their character entirely about their sexual orientation. And while that's still representation, it's still better than nothing. I find that's not the entire story. I'm not only gay. It's a big part of who I am, and coming out is a big process, especially a family. But it's not the only thing about me.
And it was interesting how you actually, you know what? I think we need to talk a little bit about the plot first, because then we'll talk about how you developed her, and then in the process of her trials and tribulations, she finds out that her brother is gay. So let's go to the electricity part first. Like, tell me, did you have to sort of do some research? I mean, I'm reading all this and I'm thinking, how does he know how to describe what it's doing?
I actually didn't. A lot of it, I like to sit on Wikipedia a lot, especially when I'm up late at night and can't sleep, is I'll just jump through Wikipedia articles. So I have a lot of really, really random, useless knowledge. And so probably a lot of that was came through. But also, my guess is that probably a lot of the science in there isn't really all that great science. It's probably, there was a lot of, I'm just going to kind of describe this as vague as possible and hope that it's right.
Now, was there a superhero you modeled this on?
Sort of. Storm was always one of my favorite X-Men characters.
Who's Storm?
She controls the weather.
Oh, right.
And so that was she wasn't really a direct inspiration, but she's always been one of my favorites. So I'm sure. So she was definitely a factor.
Now, a little bird told me that you played Dungeons and Dragons
all the time.
So how much of a role did that play?
I actually credit that with me being a writer. Because when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, there are the players and then there's the dungeon master. And when you're the dungeon master, you create the world and play everybody who isn't a player. You play every other character in the story. You write the plot, you figure out the twists and everything. And it's very much like writing. When people don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is, I usually actually describe it as, 6 friends sitting around a table writing a story together.
Wow, I'm gobsmacked. I've known about Dungeons and Dragons, but I never really quite understood it.
Yeah, it's very much telling a story together.
Wow. Now, Holly as a superhero she starts out a bit of a supervillain.
A little bit. She has a lot of learning to do, especially at the beginning of the book. And she goes through, like you said, the trials and tribulations in trying to become the superhero that she wants to be now that she has superpowers. And yeah, she does kind of start out as a supervillain almost.
Yeah.
She does some not very great things.
Right. And I don't want to give away bits of it because I want people to read it. But I thought there was a bit of a metaphor in her struggles trying to be a superhero as well.
Yeah, it's because what I've always found is the people try their hardest to be good, and a lot of the time you aren't. And and that can be not trying hard enough, not caring, but it can also just be because sometimes that's how life is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, Holly definitely does her best and tries and fails.
Right, and when she fails and does the villainous things, it isn't because she's trying to do villainous things.
No, not at all. I think both Holly and Jessie are very, very good characters. They're very pure of heart. But yeah, it's sometimes there are a couple times where that kind of slips a little bit for her. And there are times when she's trying to do good, and sometimes when you're trying to do good, it just doesn't work.
And it was interesting because Jessie is the younger of the two, and he seems to develop in strength of character in a way that she doesn't as quickly.
Yeah, and that is something that I've found with both myself and with a lot of queer men that I know, at least. Actually, queer women as well, is we tend to mature very, very quickly, especially in kind of the late teens area, because we have to. Because once you are out as queer, or even once you've come out to yourself as queer, you have to mature really, really quickly because the world beats you down. So... And
And I like also, you don't let the reader off easily. Like this is not Walt Disney.
No, it is not. Yeah, I wanted it to be as realistic as a superhero novel really could.
Yeah. Tell me how the book is being received. What are you hearing from people?
I've actually had a few people who I've never met before, who aren't friends of mine, say that it's among their favorite books, which is really, really high praise. I know one person who doesn't read very often who couldn't put the book down. So it's been received really, really well.
That's always a test, isn't it? When you hear somebody say, I couldn't put the book down.
It really is. That was actually one of the first few readers of it, but it really, really stuck with me.
Where did the name come from?
So I was playing around with names right at the beginning, and I liked the name Gary Gray just because it's the same word, just with the middle letters flipped.
Oh, well, yeah.
And that's literally where it came from. Initially, the book itself was actually called Shades of Grey. And then 50 Shades of Grey came out, and I went, nope, that has to change.
Now, were you planning on making this a trilogy?
Yes, I am.
And have you started?
I've started the second one. It's about halfway done.
How is that process going compared to the first one?
It's taking about as long. I'm definitely not going to be finishing the first draft in anywhere close to a month. But because I know a lot more about the characters and I know more about what the story is that I want to tell, it's simultaneously easier and harder because I know where I want to go. Whereas with Grayscale, I wasn't entirely sure what the ending would look like. And that kind of made it easier because I could just let it flow and let it happen as it happened. Whereas this time I know what I want to start the third novel with. Cool. So I know how I need to end the second one.
I've only got a second. Do you like your characters?
I do love my characters. I think that they're both great people.
Congratulations again. Thank you so much. Grayscale is available online through Amazon, Goodreads, and locally in Windsor at Biblioaces. That's all for this episode of Scribes and Songsters. Many thanks to our guests, Alexei Ungurenasu and A.E. Clarke. Thanks to our Scribes and Songsters team, producer Liz Pettypiece Phillips, technical producer and editor Gary Glass, social media manager Michelle Fortier, and consultant Brian Sweet. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.